Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Death toll from collapsed metal bridge at Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University in Bauchi State rises to 4 as school authorities shut down economic activities and academic activities to mourn victims. Court fixes August the 8th to rule on DSS application to detain publisher of Sahara Reporters Moyele Sowore beyond 48 hours over Revolution Now protest. African Development Bank seeks investment in Nigeria's agricultural industry with a pledge to invest $1 billion in the country's agricultural sector in the next 5 years. And Chinese government warns anti-government protesters in Hong Kong who engage in violence and crimes to desist or be held accountable. For more information on all our top stories, don't forget to visit our website. It's channelstv.com. YouTube.com/channelsweb has all our shows. All right, so here are the stories you sent to our Eyewitness report portal. You will recall that our Eyewitness sent a video showing the manhandling of personnel at the Enugu Electricity Distribution Company in Umuoji, Ogidi in Anambra State. Well, he sent another one today. This time, it's one of arrest of the attackers by the police. He commends the promptness of the arrest and warns against customers taking laws into their own hands. And this next image from Kankara shows the state of this road set to be leading from a community in Sheme in Katsina State. Our Eyewitness reporter laments the poor state of that road, has raising concern over the danger that it portends for residents. He's also asking relevant government agencies to take steps on this road before it becomes a death trap. And finally is this picture of an infrastructure also showing the poor state of a metallic hole on the Onitsha-Niger Bridge. Our Eyewitness reporter wants this attended to before it becomes worse. Don't forget to keep sending in your pictures. And now we go to our Abuja studios where Linda Akibe is standing by to give us more. Hello, Linda.
Hello, Anne. Welcome to Abuja. Now, barely 1 week after the Senate screened and confirmed all the 43 ministerial nominees appointed by the President, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation says that President Muhammadu Buhari will swear in the ministers on Wednesday, August the 21st. Mr. Boss Mustafa explained in a statement that the swearing-in ceremony would hold after an induction retreat, which is scheduled for August the 19th and 20th. According to him, all the ministers designate, the head of civil service of the Federation and federal permanent secretaries are expected to attend the induction retreat. Meanwhile, the ministers designate collected their study guide and other government documents at the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation today. The ministers also did their documentation ahead of the retreat. Now, shortly after the inauguration, President Buhari is expected to assign portfolios to them and preside over the first meeting of the council in his second term. The federal government is making a case for the proper inclusion of persons living with disabilities and internally displaced persons into the electoral process across the West African sub-region. President Muhammadu Buhari is asking the body to make efforts and consolidate the democracy in the region. He was speaking through the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, at the 6th Biennial General Assembly of the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commissions in Abuja. Our correspondent, Amaka Okafor, has a report.
A meeting like this is such that policies and strategies regarding electoral processes are discussed. However, the 6th biennial meeting of the electoral bodies across the West African sub-region focuses on the participation of women, youth and persons with disabilities.
On that historic occasion of signing the bill into law on 31st of May.
Addressing the opening session on behalf of President Muhammadu Buhari, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, declares Nigeria's commitment to the continuous integration of the youth, persons living with disabilities and internally displaced persons into the electoral processes in the sub-region.
Before the last general election in Nigeria, I assented to a constitutional amendment bill that reduce the age required of a candidate to contest for some elective offices. We should continue to ensure that not only the youth, but other categories of citizens, such as persons living with disabilities and those internally displaced, for a variety of reasons, are integrated into the electoral process in Nigeria in particular, and other countries in our sub-region in general.
The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, who is also the chairman of the ECOWAS Network of Electoral Commissions, is concerned about the high cost of conducting elections in the region.
A critical issue for the future of ECONEC is funding. With the support of OSTIWA, the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, experts were commissioned to undertake a major study on the worrisome cost of conducting elections in the sub-region.
This session of the Assembly is expected to produce a legal framework and policy for the participation of women, youth and persons with disabilities in electoral processes across West Africa. Amaka Okafor, Channels Television News.
And that's all from Abuja. Back to you, Anne.
Thank you, Linda. The African Development Bank is seeking investment in Nigeria's agricultural industry with a pledge to invest $1 billion in the country's agriculture sector in the next 5 years. The senior director of the African Development Bank in Nigeria says the Nigerian government has put in place several measures to combat the various challenges investors might face in Nigeria's agro-industrialization. Our correspondent Kayla Megwa reports.
According to the African Development Bank statistics, the agricultural sector is responsible for more than 30% of the employment in Nigeria. 84 million hectares of arable land, irrigable area of 3.14 million hectares, 279 billion cubic meters of surface water, 58 billion cubic meters of underground water, 3 of Africa's 8 major river systems, 17 dams, Africa's largest population, and some of the lowest average wages on the continent. Then there's the large domestic market and import dependency. These are just a few of the investment opportunities in Nigeria, which the African Development Bank are presenting to Chinese investors as they promote special agro-industrial processing zones in the country, which, among other things, aims at bringing basic infrastructure and employment opportunities to rural areas.
In our own case, we are basically looking for direct private sector investments. So we don't want to incur loans as much as possible. We want people who come into this country and simply just invest.
The investors had some views on what challenges they may face if they choose to invest.
We may need to conduct more investigations on the policies and the relevant supporting infrastructures, and also we may need to look for more information from the state government and also the other relevant institutions.
The senior director of the African Development Bank in Nigeria explains why China ranks high in the list of collaborators in the sector.
China has vast experience in agro-processing across the board, from production all the way to industrialization. Security, yes, is an issue in some areas, but I think that experience has shown that we have been able to invest in, to promote investments in areas.
The level of investment required to move Nigeria's agricultural industry from where it is to where it should be will require a lot of foreign collaborations, which is why the African Development Bank is reaching out to China for investments. The problem with that, however, is that the local farmer seems left out in the process. In this particular collaboration, the African Development Bank has promised that the local farmer will not be left out. Kayla Magwa, Channels Television News.
We're now being joined on the news at 10 by an agric entrepreneur. As the chairman of the Agric and Allied Group of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, African farmer Mogaji, to look at the plan by the African Development Bank, the AFDB, to invest $1 billion into the country's agric sector over the next 5 years. Thank you very much for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you for having me.
Now, $1 billion, that is a major boost. How do you think this will work?
Well, excuse me. I think the youth needs to begin to celebrate because bringing in that fund will create employment and will be able to resolve some underemployment. And across the value chain, there would be an upward movement. And food security, I'm sure, will be getting closer to that.
So that's the impact you think that will make in the agri sector in the country?
Yeah, and also in addition to that, it would propel the private sector locally here to follow suit because the private sector naturally will move towards where the investment is. And so this move by AFDB is actually going to, move across the value chain into other sectors in the country. So it's a welcome development.
So you just talked about local investors. How about foreign investors? The AFDB has promised to bring in foreign investors. Now I'll ask you, are there success stories in the agri sector that can at least encourage these foreign investors to come and drop their money?
Okay, what's Nigeria's ranking in the ease of doing business?
Nigeria's ranking is about 146 out of 190.
Yes, so that means that we need to improve more.
Okay,
so if we move up that ladder, then foreign investors come in. They are willing because I've been to Europe twice this year and to attending different investment forums, and I found out that they're willing to come, but they just need to know that the climate is clear for them.
So talking about a clear climate, what do farmers, local farmers in Nigeria need? Are you all organized enough to be able to access the opportunities this fund will bring?
We're not well organized.
And why is that?
Yes, because everybody is doing what they're doing, but we have different groups coming up, like the NABG, Nigeria Agribusiness Group, and other groups coming up to give a voice to the private sector. And I think why we're not that organized is because many of us focus more on government, forgetting that we give that direction to government and government creates that platform. So I think we need to get more organized.
So getting more organized, do you think that you all know what you need? $1 billion, I think, is a lot of money.
Yes, we know what we need. A lot of that money would go into some channeling around the ministry. The Ministry of Agriculture has a lot to do with how that money is well implemented. So we need, we're hoping that the new Minister of Agriculture would hit the road running and will not start anything new, but bring all those old policies that is lying on the table together and give action to it.
So what will be the impact of this whole idea and initiative and fund on the Nigerian economy?
I think that we would really move away from oil with this investment, and agriculture will indeed be the next oil in this country.
So come 5 years, quick one before you go, do you see agriculture becoming the next oil in Nigeria?
Agric is already the next oil in Nigeria.
All right. We hope so. Thank you very much, Farmer Mogaji. He's the African Farmer Mogaji. He's the African Development Bank. Okay, he's an agric entrepreneur, actually. I've always talked about your funny name, but thank you very much for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and when the News at 10 returns in just a moment, Chinese government warns protesters in Hong Kong engaging in violence and crimes that assist all be held accountable. That and more coming up next.